What's the most ridiculous thing you've ever witnessed in the waiting area at the ER? My wife had cancer that had spread through her body. We had found out it had spread to her eye. A couple or 3 days later my wife started getting a migraine that started behind the eye that the eye doctor said the cancer had spread to. She called his office and was told to go to the ER for treatment/relief. On the way to the hospital was the building my daughter had her guitar lessons at, and she was due to go when my wife finally admitted she couldn't stand the pain anymore and wanted to go to the hospital. So on the way to the hospital we dropped off my daughter for her guitar lesson. At the hospital I had to speak for my wife as the pain in her head had nearly turned her into a zombie. We sat down in the waiting room and I observed the other people waiting their turn. It looked like there wasn't anyone who had a real emergency. No broken bones, scrapes or bruises. Of course this doesn't always tell the whole story, but no one looked like they needed immediate treatment. Oh, there was a baby crying who may have need immediate treatment. Anyway, my wife put her head between her knees and I left her to go pick up my daughter. I was gone about an hour when I returned to the ER. In the waiting room the crying baby was gone, as were the rest of the people that were there when I left my wife. My wife was still there with her head between her knees. I tried talking to my wife and she was coherent and said her name hadn't been called. Along came a couple carrying their child who obviously looked hurt, and the ER staff made a quick assessment and took him in. That was fine. Then they called in a man who told the nurse that called him that he had twisted his ankle and wanted it checked out. I went red with anger but held myself in check, because if I, or anyone, displayed hostility then security would be called, perhaps even the police. I approached the nurse calling the patients up for treatment and explained my wife's circumstance and that she'd been waiting for over an hour. Then she called up this man with a twisted ankle. Wait for it, he wasn't even limping. When was my wife going to be called? The nurse profusely apologized and called my wife immediately. I had to help her to the treatment area because she could barely walk. She had a face on that looked like she was playing a game of poker and was frozen. I had never seen her eyes so glazed over. She got pain treatment, and when her face relaxed and her eyes cleared, her attending doctor said the cancer couldn't have caused her migraine, as cancer doesn't invade the eye. We had been warned about this belief by our eye doctor. He had explained that the eye does get growths, but they may not be worrisome, as that's all they are, is growths. However, if that growth is leaking, as my wife's was, then that is cancer that needs to be treated. My wife was a medical ethicist, but she, nor I, was in shape to school the ER doctor. I thanked him for his service and we left.